Chapter 9 Christ's Healing Power. One of our great human problems is that of sickness and suffering. The sick are everywhere. In the city of New York, it is estimated that 75,000 people are ill every day. Add to this number those who are coming down with sickness, those who are at a state of poor health and not listed officially, those who are convalescent, and the total number of sick assumes amazing proportions. In addition is that vast host of people who are mentally ill. A report of the American Psychiatric Association, published in connection with one of its recent national meetings, tells us that mental diseases have increased so rapidly in kind and quantity during late years that more than half of the nation's hospital capacity is devoted to the care of the mentally ill. Well, I'm not sure it would have increased in recent years, but certain changes in the media could have done that then. It's certainly done that in the past few years of my country, or at least the current. Well, I guess we may have a new president when this is released, but but alcohol is connected to most mental illness, and tobacco and other drugs connected to most of the rest. Dr. Henry C. Link points out that in 1933, the total number of patient days in all hospitals in the United States for mental cases was 173 million cases against 123 million patient days for all other diseases. In New York State, it has been authoritatively estimated, he declares, that hereafter 1 in every 22 persons born in the state will go to an institution for mental illness. Such cases represent the extremes of individual failure. Well, some of that's societal, though, because often people are mentally ill because of how people treated them, or because they weren't treated, or but we see their intermediate symptoms in the feverish pursuit of panaceas for happiness, which characterizes the whole fabric of our current national life. From all of this, it is obvious that people are breaking in their minds under the stress and strain of modern life. What's that show? Rocco's Modern Life? Is it that people realized how not appropriate for kids that show was? Or maybe enough mothers saw it. The father was like, yeah, they're going to know about this when they're older, so whatever. But, the modern foods have resulted in so much mental illness, right? So much physical illness. This generation is grievously suffering from diseases of degeneration, such as heart trouble, high blood pressure, and various forms of nervous trouble. It seems that everywhere life is unsatisfactory for multitudes of people due to sickness, the stress of nervous tension, and the tragedy of divided personalities. Who can compute the vast number of those whose lives are out of balance? The unsatisfied people, they are sick too, men and women who are unhappy, down deep in their souls because some vital part of their nature is underdeveloped in a world who are frustrated by life. Consider also the endless number of people who are everlastingly at war with themselves, who suffer from inner conflicts. These are people who cannot sleep soundly, whose food is just short of complete tastiness, and whose days are inwardly frantic because they have no peace within themselves. Truly, the sick are everywhere. Nor have we mentioned those who are sick from fear and worry, those two ancient enemies of the human spirit. Ordinarily, we do not realize the power of fear and worry, long held to make one physically ill, to say nothing of causing mental illness. No man could be any more compellingly aware of the situation I have just described than a clergyman whose service is rendered at the heart of America's greatest city. On the basis of my experience in being called upon to deal with a multitude of cases of every manner and kind, I offer it as my judgment that if America needs any one thing today, it desperately needs the cooling balm and healing grace of Jesus Christ. While they find that basically having any religious belief is actually good for mental health, even if some of the claims are not in line with the evidence that can be said in regards to the physical world, things that they're claiming, or some other thing, right? We need to have our nerves quieted if our bodies and minds are to be healed, and if health is to be characterized, it is to characterize our life today. It ought to be obvious at this late date that our salvation as a people cannot be achieved wholly by scientific invention or by political and social planning, however well conceived. Fundamentally, our salvation lies where it has always reposed, in coming unto the waters of God and drinking our fill, to the end that we may find peace and rest unto our souls, and with it that calm and poise without which we can never be strong and effective. Many are finding in religious faith today a power to help the sick, using this latter term in the general sense in which I have outlined it. Jesus Christ frequently referred to himself as a physician, and often in the New Testament we are told he healed many. Some years ago, a distinguished French physician, Dr. Coup, came to this country. I heard him speak in the city of Boston before a vast assemblage. He came declaring that he had the power to heal the sick. I saw the lame, the halt, and the blind crowd hopefully about him. They even carried people in on stretchers who looked up with wistful longing into his face. Many of these people went away disappointed. As I beheld this scene, I thought of a great healer long ago, to whom also came the sick and the suffering. I could see him with a vast throng of people surrounding him. Remember that basically every miracle attributed to Jesus was also attributed to other biblical prophets. There he stood, tall, strong, vigorous, with the electric power of mighty physical, mental, and moral health emanating from his personality. His voice, clear as a silver bell and vibrant with truth, rang out over the multitude. The people listened as, in the hush of a great awe, they were in the presence of immortal power, and they knew it. Here was a man through whom the tides of the infinite were flowing, and the people were conscious of that power. The Bible tells us that when he had finished speaking, the crowd rushed upon him and sought to touch him, and there went power out of him, and he healed them all. Well, remember that case of the woman? It was your faith that healed you, and we find that faith in anything, again, can help. Is it not possible that the same healing power is available today, no less than in the long ago, to those who completely put their lives, mind, soul, and body under the influence of Jesus Christ? Is he not called with merit the great physician? Dr. John Maillard, a prominent English clergyman, in his book Healing in the Name of Jesus, It advances the thesis that Jesus Christ enjoyed the power of healing not because of his natural compassion or of healing forces within himself, for the Master made no personal claims when he healed the sick. He said, "The Father in me doeth the works." Dr. Maillard points out that Christ was the perfect channel through which the power and love of God flowed, and the Gospels tells us that as many as touched him were made whole. If this power is still operative, and we see no reason for assuming that it is not, it would mean that any man today who completely opens himself to the influence of the spiritual Christ would straightway clear a channel within himself through which this divine power might flow. And this point of view has impressive scientific support, for as Dr. J.A. Hadfield, the eminent neurologist of Oxford, points out, the greatest psychologists tend toward the view that the fundamental source of power is to be regarded as some impulse that works through us and is not of our own making. Bergson refers to it as the elan vital. Janet calls it the mental energy. Jung speaks of the libido, or urge, a force which surges through our lives. These views suggest that we are intended to be not merely receptacles, but channels of energy. When we detach ourselves from this flow of power, we become isolated units and gradually become inwardly barren, with the result that all manner of infirmity and disease develop within us. We are like little stagnant pools cut off from the main stream of a river, which in time become festering places in which no cleansing streams make a healthful condition possible. Now, lest I be misunderstood, may I declare that my attitude toward this question of Christ's healing power is on the intellectually respectable basis of religion and science. Because they're supposed to work together, right? But science would not distinguish belief in Jesus versus other belief, right? I have no patience with quackery in any form. I come from a family of doctors, merchants, and clergymen, and have a profound and unshakable faith in and affection for the practitioner of medicine. Most physicians, however, agree today that there is an increasing rapprochement between religion and medicine. Dr. Richard C. Cabot, a distinguished physician, in his book, The Art of Ministering to the Sick, quotes with approval Dr. James H. Means, chief of the medical service at the Massachusetts General Hospital and professor of clinical medicine at the Harvard Medical School, as saying recently, "I believe the patient should send for his minister when he gets sick, just as he sends for his doctor." Well, it can help sometimes to have somebody tells you the spiritual response, right? Or, to combine them two. Other physicians indicate a growing sense of unity between the kindred arts of physical, mental, and spiritual healing. Dr. William Brown of Oxford and King's College Hospital in London declares, "I've become more convinced than ever that religion is the most important thing in life and that it is essential to mental health." Because even the drug use that's part of some religions, the alcohol and church services and stuff like this, that does brain damage or whatever, the fact that it's put in that context, it comes off differently, right? When somebody does shamanism, it's not just like some hippie doing drugs and saying, "I'm spiritual, look at how much marijuana I can smoke in front of my rocks." I got rocks over there too. But, that's not religion. Dr. J.A. Hadfield owning rocks and, having some weed or something. Dr. J.A. Hadfield, previously quoted, who is also of the famous Harley Street, expresses the same conviction. I am convinced, he says, that the Christian religion is one of the most valuable and potent influences that we possess for producing that harmony and peace of mind, that confidence of soul. Okay, one of the most, which are needed to bring health and power to a large portion of nervous patients. And part of it is because, there's so many Christians. Part of it also is that the Bible's a big book and has a lot of guidance all over the place, and people identify with what's going to work for them. In some cases, he continues, I have attempted to cure nervous cases with suggestions of quietness and confidence, but without success until I have linked these suggestions onto that faith in the power of God, which is the substance of the Christian's confidence and hope. Then the patient has become strong. Lord Dawson of Penn, physician to His Majesty the King, has in frequent utterances testified to the aid religion can render medicine in curing the mental and physical ills of society. Well, even if it's something that's not so effective, the fact that, a doctor prescribed it and they put in, in this unique handwriting that you don't see in letters and stuff. Usually, he has expressed the opinion that in functional and organic diseases, there are reactions of mind and temperament, and we have to study not only the material disease, but the complete fabric or makeup of this or that personal illness. It is a significant thing in this connection to read in the British Medical Journal, there is not a tissue of the human body wholly removed from the influence of spirit. And this chorus is joined by the voice of Dr. C.G. Jung, the eminent Swiss physician and psychologist. I should like to call attention, said Dr. Jung, to the fact that among all my patients over 35 years of age, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. Sigmund Freud hated him saying stuff like that, but a lot of Freud's anti-religious stuff has been disproved, so that statement, may I interject, is worthy of the profoundest meditation. It is safe to say, continues Dr. Jung, that every one of them fell ill because he had lost that which living religion bestows, and none of them has been really healed who did not regain his religious control outlook. Consider that carefully, you sick man or woman. Religion has healing power, because it's a relationship, and something's wrong with your ideas of relationship, it's going to take out other things, right? Declares this great physician. Isn't it interesting, to say the least, to think that perhaps your trouble, which you may think is a deep-seated physical malady, may be traced instead to an absence of spiritual vitality in your life? I do not say that such is the case because I am not a physician, nor do I make any pretense at being one. I am simply saying that it is the judgment of some of the most discriminating minds in the field of psychology, medicine, and religion that a spiritual lack is the basic cause of much illness. It might be a very helpful thing for you tonight, when you take your medicine, to pray at the same time. Ask God to come into your life and give you health that may do you as much good as your pills. Some people who do not know what is the matter with them may find it advantageous to join with the services of a good physician, a skillful minister of religion. Dr. Henry C. Link, the distinguished New York psychologist, whom I have previously quoted in his book, The Return to Religion, tells us that in treating people, he found himself constantly reducing his professional and scientific facts to what amounted to the simple precepts of religion. He discovered that he could not practice his profession adequately without applied Christianity, so that he returned to religion himself after having eliminated it from his life for a number of years. Dr. John Rathbone Oliver, professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins University, declares that the greatest psychologist or healer of the mind who ever lived is Jesus of Nazareth. Nowadays, he says, I sometimes hear one of my psychiatric colleagues proclaiming some new truth in connection with mental illness, and somehow the new doctrine seems to have a familiar sound. When I trace this familiarity to its source, I find myself not in the latest book by Freud or Adler, but in the Gospels. Many general principles, I was supposed to say Freud, right? Many general principles that our Lord laid down long ago have been rediscovered by scientists and proclaimed from the housetops as something new. And so much of things are like that, right? People say, oh, it's new and all that stuff, and it's like, no, religion has been talking about it for so long, right? Other religions too, But remember, Jesus said he came not to do away with any of the law, but to plerose. He was refurbishing things. So, again, stuff that had been said before, he was restoring it. The manner in which medicine and religion combine to effect healing and to bring unity to disorganized personalities may be illustrated by an incident brought to my attention by a prominent New York physician. He told me that a gentleman came to see him, complaining of not feeling well, and who, in fact, seemed very greatly distressed and gave every appearance of being in a state of illness. The physician made a complete examination and informed the patient that he could find nothing definitely wrong with him. About 2 weeks later, the man reappeared and said, Doctor, I want you to examine me again, for I am really at my wit's end. I feel very bad. I am nervous and upset. I cannot eat or sleep, and he concluded with a gesture of futility, I'm completely miserable. Sometimes it takes a while for the doctors to find things out, right? And we're finding out that's more and more the case. So it's worth running the extra test if there's actually some something going on. The doctor examined him again, and finally, being a very wise man and an honest one as well, said to the patient, there is, as far as I can see, nothing definitely wrong with you physically. Your body is not functioning normally, to be sure, but I find no evidence of organic trouble. Nowadays, we find out that some people can eat some things and other people shouldn't eat those things, right? It becomes culture to eat white bread and milk, and most people shouldn't have milk, and really no one should be eating white bread, but, and there's other examples. And then he said, you must have something on your mind. And searching, and quietly the physician added, you must have something on your conscience. Have you done anything that is wrong that you were ashamed of? Whereupon the patient became very angry and vehemently said, I will not stand for being insulted by you. I came here for medical advice, not a sermon. So saying, he flounced out of the office. A few days later, he was back, and this time in a much chastened spirit. Doctor, he said, I will confess that you put your finger on the truth of it. I have done something very wrong. The doctor asked him to tell his story, counseling that a complete emptying of his mind was absolutely vital to to a restoration of his health. Well, sometimes you don't want to hear about, those A-level felonies that people confess. Um, the patient said that some years before, his father, a very wealthy man, had died and had bequeathed to him and to his brother equal shares in his large estate. Shortly thereafter, the brother had gone to Europe to live, leaving the management of the estate in the hands of this brother in America, whose duty it was to send him, as stated at stated intervals, his share of the income. The brother at home, having the business entirely in his own hands, decided after a long struggle to retain for himself a portion of that which was due his absent brother. He thought he could, to use a current phrase, get away with it, for the reason that the books were under his jurisdiction, and from that point of view, he could but, and this is the subtly important thing, he couldn't get away with it. In his own mind, the dishonesty, because in every respect, like a wound in the mind, that would not heal because it was the center of an infection, and it came sending off poisons throughout his system. The doctor listened to the story of his patient until he had told it all, and then said, "In what bank is your bank account?" The doctor sent his office boy to the bank, and soon he was back with a blank check, upon receiving which the physician asked, "How much can you pay your brother?" The man stated an amount, and the doctor commanded, "Write the check," which the patient did with trembling hand. Then the doctor dictated a letter to the brother, who had been defrauded, in which the story was told, including the incident about the confession to the doctor, and closed by saying that he was now beginning the payment of the entire sum in default, which repayments would be made at regular and stated intervals. The patient signed it, the letter was sealed, and the doctor placed it in his patient's hand. Together, they walked to the mail chute, and the doctor instructed him to drop it. Dropping the letter was like dropping a tremendous burden from the man's life, and the physician, with a smile, said to him, "You might feel better now, don't you?" The man said, "I never knew what the word relief meant before." This physician, in recounting the story to me, said that the patient, when he came to him with this thing on his mind, was actually ill, but that to give him medicine or treat him in any other than a spiritual way would, in his opinion, have been malpractice. The trouble with the man was that he had what the psychologists call conscious distress, or a sense of guilt, which affected his entire organism. In this case, the physician combined the scientific and spiritual functions, and it is one of the happiest illustrations I know of the essential correspondence between medicine and religion as healing agents. As the minister of a city church, I have been driven by practical necessity to a liaison between religion and the science of psychology. Into my study is ever coming a constant and growing stream of people whose ills are obviously related to inner lack of harmony. With many of these I can deal, but some are beyond my knowledge and are deserving of both spiritual and scientific treatment. A clergyman must rightfully be very cautious about overlapping on the field of the physician. There was a day when the clergyman would deal with people in trouble by simply telling them to pray and trust God, or with the sinful by admonishing them to confess their sins and be converted. This still remains the fundamental method of healing, but the technique by which this eternally modern treatment is to be applied has advanced in skill over that used by our fathers. My deficiencies in scientific technique led me to cast around for a method by which the Church might more adequately deal with the increasing number of personal problems presented. At first, I considered the proposition of establishing a psychological clinic. I consulted eminent medical men who advised against a clinic on the basis that it did not represent the best psychology, for the reason that it would institutionalize what could be done better by personal treatment. Finally, a plan has been devised whereby I keep a careful record of each case and at stated intervals spend hours with a well-trained psychologist who studies with me each case which I desire to bring to his attention. If it seems advisable for the patient, or shall I say parishioner, to see the psychologist, I arrange for such an interview by saying, I have a friend who understands problems such as yours, and I would like very much for you to talk with him. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints also operates with that. They have psychologists that are church members, and they make deals that way to network like that, or at least members that find themselves in positions of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. To some degree, that's done in Eckankar, so it's done in different types of corporatized religions at the very least. Depending upon the person involved, I may frankly state that the friend is a psychologist. This case may or may not be referred back to me. The psychologist is himself a Christian man and sympathetic with the spiritual factors in personality disarrangement. And see, that's one of the things. If somebody's of a different faith, they may say you're crazy because you're of a different thing. And I've heard of examples of psychologists that because they were a different religion than the patient, then they diagnosed us with mental illness. But if the person was of their religion, some of those diagnoses would not have been the same. The motive which has led this eminent psychologist to lend himself to such an arrangement is the double one of rendering service and of himself studying the relationship of psychology to the spiritual work of the minister. Together we share the belief that the time will come when individual churches or groups of churches, depending upon their financial ability, will have related to their work specialists in this important field. The Christian psychologist is likely to become an integral part of the spiritual staff of the church of the future. Christ's healing power is not presented in this book as a theory. Well, a theory would be supported by the facts, but as a demonstrated fact. Yeah, that's what theory is supposed to mean, right? It's an arrangement of the facts. I have personally seen the workings of spiritual forces in cases of nervous trouble and indeed in various types of illness with such effectiveness that there remains in my mind a profound conviction that the future will witness remarkable advance in the therapeutic usage of religion, dealing with people as I have in the day-by-day life. I have become convinced that in spiritual power we possess a valuable healing agent, and I have been continually impressed by the way in which our medicine works. It has been demonstrated that if an individual will adopt the attitude of a child and yield himself in complete surrender to God, he will open himself to the inflowing of the healing grace of God. Alexis Carrel and Mann, the unknown previously referred to, substantiates this point of view. Dr. Carrel offers it as his conviction that there is a much deeper relationship between psychological and even physiological processes and the spiritual life than we have supposed. Indeed, he assumes an advanced position by describing with apparent approval the recorded healings of Lourdes and declares on the basis of those cures that the only condition indispensable to the phenomenon of healing is prayer. He gives us the further interesting suggestion that there is no need for the patient himself to pray. It is sufficient that someone around him be in a state of prayer. We are not prepared to evaluate the position of Dr. Carrel, but his undisputed scientific eminence lends significance to his contribution to this field. In all healing, he regards prayer as of profound importance, but warns, and wisely, that prayer should be understood not as a mere mechanical recitation of formulas, but as absorption of the consciousness in God. God is in me, and I am in God. Whether you're aware of it or not, divine presence and all that sort of stuff, or putting things in the context of it has an effect on levels beyond what knowledge of that, direct knowledge would say. So belief and faith are along the way. It means to put all thoughts of self out of our minds, or at least false selves anyways, to discard every vestige of will, to put oneself completely under the will of God, or to use Dr. Carrel's definition, prayer is man's offering himself to God. It is man standing before God as the canvas stands before the painter. The canvas, in effect, says to the painter, I'm empty, fill me as your will. And the artist fills the canvas full of his own genius. Taking this attitude toward the power of God, any sufferer is likely to find an axis of new strength and healing. And remember, Islam means submission, surrender. And so Islam is the surrender to God. But not the surrender, your identity is put in that context, but you don't, separate from yourself, or you don't become the same and all that. You know what I mean? Because some people are saying that you get so advanced and then you're no longer yourself. You no longer have a separate identity. You are God, or some of that sort of stuff that people say, right? Deny yourself to find yourself is basically what we're talking about here. 3 incidents from my personal experience serve to illustrate the practical outworking of this principle. 3 people well known to me who actually surrendered themselves to God by an act of childlike faith received new life in a manner so astoundingly conclusive as to leave no room for doubt that there is in applied Christianity a profound healing power available for all men everywhere. The first is my own mother, who began to break physically under the strain of life. She consulted a noted physician, who, after an examination, asked her the unexpected question, Madame, are you a Christian? To which she in surprise replied, Why, yes, I consider myself a Christian. She recited to him the several and important positions in which she was rendering a devoted Christian service. He listened and shook his head. No, madame, despite all of that, I doubt if you are a real Christian. Now, people go too far with that, but, somebody being churchy, if they mean it, He explained his statement by saying, I understand that being a Christian means to have childlike faith and trust, to believe that God loves you and exercises watchful care over you, to believe that you can talk to Him, and by prayer and by faith receive from Him strength sufficient to offset the drain of life. In this sort of Christianity, you, like most of us, he added, are deficient. You believe all these things. Now go out and practice them, and I believe you will get well. So, he concluded, here is my prescription. Go off to a quiet place alone and think about God, and get His peace into your soul. She took his advice and went out on Cape Ann, a rocky promontory on the Massachusetts coast. There, each day she sat by the sea until she truly knew that deep calleth unto the deep. She listened to that long roar of the waters as they surged against the rocks. The clean, vagrant winds swept the cobwebs from her mind. The Radhaswami bees groups and the groups based on them and stuff talk about sounds and give them attributes of realms, and it allows them to separate things. She beheld the wide sweep of the dark blue ocean, and it came over her that there is unmistakably a wideness in God's mercy like the wideness of the sea. At first, she said, her eyes wearily rested on the nearby rocks and waves, but gradually she lifted them to the far horizon until presently the vastness of the tumbling sea brought home to her that vastness which is God. He who long ago spoke the word of peace on Galilee spoke peace to her too. The marvelous recuperative power of God manifested itself in her, so that her body and spirit took on a new vigor and vitality that literally amounted to a recreation. Well, people of any faith can have that connection. They're like, oh, why my spiritual teacher taught about that sort of principle. The second person who experienced the restoration of surrendered faith is a distinguished public servant. 15 years ago, his life was despaired of, and he had been given to understand that he must cease work and carefully guard himself if he was even to live. On the morning after this blow was dealt him, he said that he awakened to see the sunlight streaming into his room. Lying there in bed, he thought of Christ and how long ago the Master helped and healed people. He closed his eyes and, as simply as a child, prayed something like this: Lord, you know what they told me yesterday. I do not want to quit, Lord, for I have important work to do for thee. I am going to get up and go to work and put myself in your hands. If you want me to go on, you will allow me to continue. If you feel my work is ended, you will take me home. Whatever you want from me will be all right, Lord, with me. He says that he felt a great peace in his heart after praying thus. He arose and did a hard day's work. The next morning, before arising, he prayed again. Lord, we had a great day together yesterday. Now another day is here. You are with me, Lord, and I will have no fear. If you want me to work this day, Lord, I shall be glad. I am in your hands. So, day after day, he has prayed through the years. He literally lives with Christ as a companion. Well, he praise considering that. Proceeding in that way, he has opened his life to streams of living water, which heal him, give him peace, and allow nature to build up his body, watching him doing his prodigious work, involving important decisions and policies, the strain of which would break down stronger men. One is aware, from the deep peace on his face and in his eyes, that he has found a tremendous secret. Late one night, a physician telephoned and asked me to come to an address where he had a patient suffering from nervous and physical breakdown. The doctor said, "I think this man needs some of your kind of medicine." Presently, I stood by the door of the house, but before pressing the bell, I bowed there in the darkness in a moment of prayer, telling God that I had no power or wisdom, and asking him to guide me in what I should do and say. The doctor led me into the room, saying, "Our patient needs a deep peace and a power beyond himself, to which he may cling for the strength which he does not have in himself." Now, Hillary Clinton has insulted those people that cling to their Bibles. It's like, well, what, you think clinging to the state doctrines are, going to do better for people? Didn't millions of people die because of those things? And aren't even more people miserable because of their conservativeness in politics? And I mean, they allow others to make their own decisions. And that goes for both political parties. Let's not pretend that Republican or Democrat is how you define what a liberal or conservative is. I will confess, I scarcely knew what to do, but I did not need to know, for when one wants with all his heart to have God's help, he gets it. And I found myself quoting various passages of Scripture such as, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul." Other Scripture passages come to mind, and I quoted them in full. Here an almost uncanny thing occurred. Some of the passages I did not know by heart, and afterward, when I attempted to recite them from memory, I failed. Of course, many readings of them had given me a deep familiarity with them, but the experience lent new meaning to the verse. Take no thought beforehand what ye shall speak, but whatever shall be given you in that hour, that speak ye, for it is not that ye speak, but the Holy Ghost. Which verse is that, and what words are left out? Indeed, I felt myself to be but a mouthpiece for someone of whose healing power I was the awestruck witness. Presently the man turned to me, with his haunting, desperate eyes, seeming to search the depths of my soul. I never had anybody look into my inmost mind as he did. He looked at me through and through for any sign of uncertainty, as he said, "Can Jesus Christ do anything for a man like me? Or is it all just religious talk and bunk?" I replied, "If you trust him like a little child, relaxing and resting upon him, he will give peace and healing to your mind and body." He still looked at me searchingly, then said as simply as a child, and in a very moving manner, "Help me, Christ." As he lay back on the bed, where almost before I knew it, he went off to sleep like a baby. He continued that trust in God, and he had a wise and skillful medical man who helped him. That was 5 years ago. Today he is the efficient head of an important educational institution. It's important to show your gratitude by making use of your newfound or recovered ability. our maintained ability. And when I watched him directing a large meeting some time ago, he saw me studying him and smiled across the room at me. As I bade him goodbye later, he said, "Don't worry about me ever again. I know where my strength lies. Ask a man like that if there is healing power in religious faith. He knows. So may you and I. It is so simple and yet so wonderful. The secret is in sincere faith and surrender of will to put your life with all of its problems in God's hands." Well, it's not just that you got to change things for yourself too, but combine it with prayer, and sometimes you don't know, and then you figure it out. That will give a superb all rightness in your life, endowing you with that calm philosophy by which men know truly that all things work together for good to those who love God. And the religion that probably details out both as a verb and a noun, love of God, the most you would say is Islam. I can't think of anything that Christianity does unique there. But, let's return to this ego death reference. It means to put all thoughts of self out of our minds. So the nafs, you're doing more than for yourself to the nafs, or the nepish. To discard every vestige of will, as not, as something separate. Your power and everything else is because of God, right? So you direct it, not only in the name of, but in the cause of, fi sabilillah. To put oneself completely under the will of God, technically that's being a Muslim, or, to use Dr. Carlyle's definition, prayer is man offering himself to God. And that's the thing. Like, some reference to human sacrifice is really just symbolic of praying every day and in different times and all that. It is man standing before God as the canvas stands before the painter. The canvas in effect says to the painter, "I am empty, fill me as your will," and the artist fills the canvas full of his own genius. Taking this attitude toward the power of God, any sufferer is likely to find an axis of new strength and healing. Now see, if you don't put yourself into religion and you're like, okay, well, I'll just do enough so I can be considered as part of it, you don't have some of that romance of it all.